Po Wednesday. And what does that mean? Anything can happen on Morph Po Wednesday. Any sort of mind control could happen on Morph Po Wednesday. You could suddenly be activated in your assassin altar deep within your brain. Could come out deep inside your lizard brain on Morph Po Wednesday. This is The Art of Dreaming, and I am still Michael Hemmingson. And today, well, if you look around in all the radio shows, talk shows, at least in the alternative media, well, in the mainstream media too, still, the whole talk is about Sandy Hook and what happened, as well as in the alternative media. We got a lot of chatter about, was he a sleeper agent? Was he a Manchurian Candidate? Blah, blah, this, blah, blah, that. And not to, even Coast to Coast, I think, had something like that on the other night. Not to jump on the bandwagon, but it is on the forefront of everything. Angela was talking about it today. Hijacker was talking about it. Deacon John, Jason, and now I. And I'm sure it's probably going to pop up with Bo and Rocco today. So, last night, Hawk came on late at night. He's been doing his research on it. In fact, we've got a page over on Freedom Slips. If you go over at freedomslips.com, our landing page, and you'll see under conspiracy. Is it under conspiracy? There's a link for under links for Aurora, and then now for Sandy Hook, and he's been following some inconsistencies and curiosities. So has a guy on YouTube whose name is Idaho Picker, and a number of other people who, well, number one, there's the whole thing about was there more than one shooter. There seems to have been two men that they arrested. The cops arrested outside the school. It seems to have been picked up by a helicopter camera, and listening to police scanners, you hear the cops talking about grabbing one or two other people. There's the witness testimony of a 9 or 10-year-old boy who says when he was brought out, he saw a guy down on the ground with handcuffs that they had as a prisoner. Now, of course, this doesn't necessarily mean these guys were the other shooters. They could have been guys walking through the woods, taking a hike or whatever, and heard the gunshots, went over there to see what was going on. All these cops are coming, and they freak out and walk away. It's par for the course that the cops would just probably grab anyone in the vicinity because they don't know what the hell's going on, and so they would just grab if they see some guys around or even a woman, they're going to grab them, see what's up. They're not part of it, they let them go. So how come we haven't heard about this? How come we haven't heard them say, well, we did grab this guy, but he wasn't part of it, et cetera, et cetera. So, just to cover all the rumors of the other shooters, and maybe we will hear about that, to cover up the fact that there was possibly other shooters. Now, we also have some strange anomalies that Nighthawk found. He's got him on that link of the police scanners. Some officers talking just a little too nonchalantly in such a situation, almost as if it was a drill. Another guy saying, "TAC 6, it's a go," which apparently means go to encoded or secure channel, a secure federal channel that's encoded this way. That's not available to the public like public police scanners are. Now, what does that mean? Why would they be going to this TAC 6? Why would they be going to a federal channel? We're talking, local sheriffs, police officers, or whatever. Why would they be going to a federal channel? So that's a weird anomaly sort of thing. The other thing that's coming up is the Libor scandal. That's the London Interbank Organization, or I think that's what it's called. It has to do. I'm even confused by it, but it has to do with the way banks charge interest against each other on loans, and essentially us. apparently it's London Interbank Offer Rate. Apparently they were futzing with the rates, interest rates, banks and governments and corporations and us, the people, apparently paying more interest rates than we should. Say, for instance, they're telling you or others, well, right now the interest rate is 19%. So the payments are made at a 19% level, yet they record it down as 16%. Well, where did the money of this other 3% go? And apparently this has been going on for years to the tune of $42 trillion. $42 trillion. That's like a third of all the money in the world. I think they've estimated that there's only $75 trillion of stuff on the planet, valuable stuff that we could base money on, even though there seems to be more electronic money than that, especially over on Wall Street when we're talking hundreds of trillions. Now, so you got $42 trillion vanished in some sort of scandal over a period of, 10 years or whatever. They've been hoarding that money somewhere, probably using it to build these underground cities and these underground bases that I talked about last week. Now, I'm still running on a theory here that they have built these underground cities, these fortified places and bases, not to hide from World War III or from the reptilian invasion or from Nibiru or whatever. I think they've built them to hide from us. Because when all this stuff comes out, and say for somehow everyone awakens, maybe the Galactic Alignment Energy or the Galactic Federation of Light and Pleiadians or whatever, the whole mass arrest situation that, Drake's been gabbing about for almost a year now. Say, for instance, all this stuff comes to light. Who's going to come after these people? But the majority, the masses, they're going to want the money back. They're going to want trials. They're going to want hangings. They're going to want all this. By that time, they've taken all our guns away. So how can we get to them without any guns when they're hauled up in these fortified underground cities with defense grids around them? So they'll be hiding out under there from us while we have no guns to come and get them. That's the theory I'm running on, why these bases and cities are being built in the Ozarks and under Colorado, well, all over the world, really. And possibly for other reasons. Maybe they're going to hide out from the reptilian mantoid invasion too, but who knows? So we got the Libor thing, and connected to that Libor thing, excuse me, my mouth is dry. Connected to that Libor thing is, of course, James Holmes' father, scientist guy who designed the software that could help track where all this $42 trillion went, who put it where. And then we have Adam Lanza's father, who is an upper management accountant, vice president at General Electric's company, or part of General Electric's, and also with a pretty large CPA firm that handles big corporations. Now this isn't verified yet, although it's popping up here and there, may or may not also be set to testify on the Libor hearings. Now, why would they do this? Is this to stop them from testifying, or to change their testimony, or as possibly a warning to others that, hey, you testify, that might happen to your kid too? So they go after the kids of these people. It'd be interesting to see if these two guys actually do testify. Something with the banking system that not very many know, and I'm going to tell you now, is that all these banks in this country and Canada and elsewhere, most likely, but in the USA and Canada, come Friday at 8 p.m., after everything's closed, they take about 75 to 80% of all the money they have, and they wire transfer it to an offshore bank. In the Caymans, Nassau, or wherever, they wire it into these offshore banks. They leave enough money in the banks for the weekend for ATM withdrawals and ATM card purchases and stuff like that. Then come Sunday night, it gets wired back to the banks. and it's all there come Monday morning. Now, you take 48 hours, 2 days of interest on billions of dollars, and offshore banks usually pay like 9-10% interest. If you take billions and billions of dollars, trillions of dollars, even 2 days of interest, you're talking millions. So the banks are making a few million, 10 million, whatever, off our money, your money, over the weekend. And where does this money go? Well, it goes into the top guys' pockets. It gets filtered to Black Ops projects. It gets filtered to Black Ops corporation projects connected to the military. It goes into the personal bank accounts of politicians and executives in the banks and corporations. The money gets spread out. So they do this every weekend. It's a dirty little secret few of us know about, but that's what they do. And why not? We put our money in their bank. We put the money in their bank for money to be made. It's just something they don't really want known generally, but it's not really that much of a secret. And that's part of the dirty little stuff that banks do, including these bankers wanting to keep their criminal stuff a secret. Now, some other things started popping up too. All these weird little connections, and again, Nighthawk has. I'm getting all this stuff from Nighthawk's research. So this isn't mine. That he's found looking around and connecting the dots. Then again, we had that shooting over in Wisconsin not too long after the Aurora shooting, connected to the film Sirius, or I don't know how do you pronounce it. That was going to expose these bankers as well as their connections to the secret space program and Mars. One of the first guys to get shot in that Sikh temple shooting was the director, the director of Sirius, his father, who I think was also a producer, was killed in that. That's another weird connection. Another is the Congresswoman Gifford shooting a couple years ago. Here she's married to a NASA astronaut. She was pro-gun control. It's possible that the actual target was a chief federal court judge, John Roll, who was killed, and he was on the Fast and Furious case against the government. Of course, we'll never know what his ruling or what he was going to do since he was killed. There was a lot of weird things about that shooting, and of course, the guy who did the shooting, what was his name? He had his name. Well, they found him to be too unfit for trial, that he was insane. But then he takes a plea. He pleads guilty to the murder, and instead of the death penalty, he gets life in prison. So there goes any kind of evidence. There goes a trial where it may have come out that he was a mind-controlled whatever MKUltra guy like Sirhan, who got life in prison as well. So they easily cover that up. Maybe they didn't shoot him or have him commit suicide like they seem to do with a lot of these guys. These guys, just conveniently kill themselves after they do their shooting spree, and then we never know anything. There was another weird connection. We had the nanny murders of a CNBC executive. CNBC had given some mainstream attention to the largest money and racketeering lawsuit in the United States history, which I don't know if that's part of the Libor thing or not. But anyway, the banksters and their racketeering partners are being accused of laundering $43 trillion. Oh, yeah, it is part of the Libor thing. So CNBC does a story on this whole Libor thing. There is a lawsuit involved with it. The lawsuit asking the federal court to put an injunction on all collected payments for housing loans, any loans or anything, until all these banksters give the $43 trillion back to the people. that $43 trillion would cover every loan in the country, if not in the world, and get everyone out of debt, just start anew, right? So the CNBC reports this, and suddenly, within hours of this, the web page that had this story was taken down, and a senior vice president there at CNBC, his name was Kevin Krim, received the news that his children were killed by a very suspicious way, that the nanny had slit their throats and then, or stabbed them and then slit her own throat for some unknown reason. And again, this looks like maybe it was just a warning. I don't know if the nanny was a mind-controlled MKUltra. Probably a professional assassin went in, and made it look like that. We got the lawsuit. It's I don't know if this is the Keenan lawsuit or not. That might have been a different one. Well, there's the lawsuit, and then we have Sandy Hook. And then there's all this weird stuff about Sandy Hook connected to The Dark Knight Rises, as well as the Hunger Game. Not necessarily the movie, but the book. The author of the Hunger Game trilogy books apparently lives there in Newton, in the Newton-Sandy Hook area. She lives there. Of course, in the Hunger Game, we have a situation in the future of a sort of a sacrificial offering to the media gods, where 23 children are chosen by lottery at a certain age when they reach, I think it's when they reach 12 or 14, I can't remember, until they're 18. By lottery, they have to go into these games where they're slaughtered, and only one is left to survive. And in the movie and the book, there's only 2 left, so you had like 21 slaughtered children as a sacrifice, almost the same number as we saw in Sandy Hook, where the author happens to live. And Sandy Hook also apparently appears on a map briefly seen in the movie The Dark Knight Rises, as well as we see a building with the words Aurora on it in blood red letters. And this has to make you think, why? Why do they do this? Are they looking at the movie firsthand and pick out things, or is this stuff inserted in there? Now, with The Dark Knight Rises, and of course Aurora happens right when the movie is premiered, well, these guys have access to the dailies, which happen as the film's being made, and the rough cuts, which they're in editing a year before it ever even is put out into the public. Now, the director doesn't have final say unless it's in his contract and he has power, but normally a director doesn't have final say on the final cut that goes out into the public. And stuff like that could easily be put into the film. Like you flash, you see Aurora on a building, flash, you see a map there really quick, easily slipped in. So we can't necessarily blame, the director or the actors and say, oh, they're all part of the Illuminati, mind control, evil cabal, blah, blah, this, blah, blah, that, right? Someone sent me something. Let me take a look at it. I'll be taking a look at it. So, because you had to ask, well, what God, are all these people a part of it? Now, the guy who produced the Batman trilogy, it's really a trilogy. All three of the movies, the last 3 movies are all connected together in one way or another. They're very dark. A lot of it has to do with insanity, mind control. Like the first one, we had the Scarecrow psychiatrist who is using a drug to turn everyone crazy and under control. One of them that goes nuts from this drug turns into the Joker, who's an escapee from Arkham Asylum. And then we have the return to the whole this secret society that's been trying to destroy Gotham City from the first movie. Now, if you look at Christopher Nolan's other movies, strangely enough, all his movies have to do with some sort of kind of mind control trickery. or secret societies or whatever. Look at the movie Inception. Inception is about corporate espionage and these corporate spies who get into people's dreams using a drug. They use a certain drug to enter the dreams of other people, generally corporate higher-ups, to influence their decision-making and to alter or in other cases to steal guarded secrets from one corporation to another. There's that in Inception. His other movie was the Prestige. And the Prestige, set in the past, it was about stage musicians, about misdirection, how to fool people, how to create magic on stage, and then it kind of swerves into the paranormal, where Nikola Tesla, played by David Bowie, enters the picture, and Nikola Tesla, by accident, creates this chamber machine that not only is a teleporter, but it creates duplicate copies of anything that goes into it, including people. So it's sort of like a clone machine. And of course, you got Nikola Tesla who does that. Who stole Nikola Tesla's patents and used them later on? J.P. Morgan, General Electric, the government. So you got all these weird little connections. Tesla, films, secret societies, corporate espionage, apocalyptic cartoon comic book stuff. Now, consider how these people work. They hire very intelligent people to do their dirty work, and it's compartmentalized to where even the people who are hired to do the dirty work aren't even aware of what they're doing. Say, for instance, now these banksters run Hollywood. They run the movie industry, the studios, the distribution, the networks, the cables. Many of these banksters are connected to Israel and generally connected to the Kabbalistic Mossad and whatever we want to call them over there. The Mossad and the Israeli agenda has been connected to a lot of these things. Now, say, for instance, this is how I'm seeing that they might do something like this. Since I've worked and still work off and on in that system in Los Angeles, where I was today. Say I get on their grid, and they're like, well, this guy's interesting. Writes some weird conspiracy stuff and good thrillers and mysteries. So my manager agent gets a call. He's like, hey, this new producer on the block, he's got an idea. He needs someone to write a treatment or a script. So I go meet this guy. Never seen him, never heard of him, but he's got lots of money. Seems to be a town player. Might be a foreigner. So he says, oh, I got this idea. I want to do a movie about this massive shooting, but it's really a government conspiracy plot. But I'm not quite sure how. I want to make it look like really intriguing, that there's all these rabbit trails and connections to one thing or another. You seem like the guy to do it. So he hires me to write a treatment, which is like a 10, 20-page story outline, or even a script. So I write it, making all this fiction, and I turn it in, I get paid. Never hear from them again, which is pretty common. And they find some interesting elements in the script or a storyline. Hey, that's a good idea. We'll use this. We'll use that. You will use this. See, the thing with a lot of major movies now, like Star Trek, the Superman movies, any big franchise sort of thing, any big potential blockbuster, they no longer hire one writer to work on it. What they do is they'll hire 10. Some of them are going to be well-known names like David Mamet. Some are going to be new and unknown names. They're going to do a little mix of both. They'll get these 10 people to adapt a book or a comic book or an idea into a script. They pay each of them $100,000. That's the bottom base. The bigger names will get $500,000 or something. But anyway, they'll get 10 people to write 10 scripts to adapt a certain product. They'll usually maybe say, pick one of them that's the best script. Okay, we'll go with this one. Or maybe they like stuff in 3 or 4 different strips, and then they combine them together. That's why when you go to a movie and you see a screenplay by blah, 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 that's because they've usually taken several strips and mashed them together, or they've been rewritten by several other people, and then you'll say based on the novel by, and then they'll say based on a story by, or something like that. So there's all these people contributing to make one whole. That is how I think they do this. They've got people creating these scenarios, thinking it's fiction or it's a video game or something. It's compartmentalized, and they have no idea what they're really doing it for. And then you got these other guys who use this creativity to do something like, hey, now let's pick out pieces of the Batman movie. Aurora. Oh, it flashed Aurora. Well, where's Aurora? Where's an Aurora in this country? Aurora, Colorado. Okay, and we see another flash of Sandy Hook. Oh, what's a Sandy Hook? Sandy Hook. Oh, look there. Oh, and that writer of the Hunger Games lives over there. Oh, this is cool. This is cool, right? Why do they do that? Because some of us are finding that these little clues, and they want us to find the clues. Now, I think this is all to just send a bunch of people on a multitude of rabbit trails. It's a game, and it's to deflect. It's to keep the conspiracy theorists and the alt media radio guys like me and Nighthawk and Hijacker who are looking into these things to go off on this trail that deflects from what's really going on. Now, perhaps it's all reverse psychology, because people are saying, oh, well, they're using this for gun control. Well, all right, we are back with the Art of Dreaming here on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, where you don't need to expect us to be, as we are already here. Yes, indeed, and I am still Michael Hemmingson, a.k.a. Wharf Poe, a.k.a. Dog Age, a.k.a. Papa Hem, a.k.a. Sprinkles Hem, Sings, and blah, 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 and a bunch of other names that are secret and not so secret. So someone, Jason, the News Crusher, just sent me a link to a slasher movie that came out in 2007, one of those direct-to-video things, called Sandy Hook Lingerie Party Massacre. Now, this came out in 2000. It's, one of these, like, bikini beach party massacre kind of movies, just awful movies, and the killer, of course, is wearing this sort of S&M gear mask, some kind of like gas mask or whatever kind of mask. Is that connected? I don't know. So anyway, as I was saying about, what was I saying about? What was I getting at? What was my point? Oh, about misdirection. So they're sending a bunch of all the conspiracy aficionados and all media types and the Alex Joneses and the Georgia Knapps and the Hijackers and the Wharf Poes off on these other directions of trying to figure out what are the connections between Batman and the Hunger Game and Libor and this and this and that and this and that. All of it obviously scripted, obviously done intentionally. Some will say, well, that's because the evil Illuminati cabal, part of the way they do things is they tell you about what they're doing, but they don't tell you directly. They give you hints and clues. I'm thinking it's just to send us all off on a rabbit hole chase. And down we go to deflect from what is really going on. So as I was saying, right now, after all these shootings, gun sales go straight up. Bullet sales go straight up. Who's making money off of this? The gun manufacturers, the government with taxes, right? Because you got the gun industry vehemently has defended itself over the years with, lawsuits. Say you've got a mass shooter with a Smith and Wesson, so they file lawsuits against Smith and Wesson. There was that movie and book by John Grisham, The Runaway Jury, which is about how the gun manufacturers try to attempt to jury tamper. If one gun company gets sued, they're all going to jump in on the defense, because if one company goes down, they all go down. And of course, gun companies have had plenty of lobbyists, spent millions of dollars, billions maybe, but certainly a great deal of money in Washington, D.C. Now, if they do this gun control, gun ban, take our guns away, you think, well, what's the gun companies going to say? The only thing I think is that they're going to pay the gun companies off. They're going to say, well, just figure out what you're going to get in losses and we'll pay it, or we'll increase orders of guns for our military use or whatever. Or this is all a ploy to increase gun sales, to get more guns in everyone's hands, to get people to use them on each other. So things get extremely chaotic. You got all these people with guns and they're starting to shoot at each other. We need martial law. With martial law, not only does that strip the Second Amendment, it strips all of them. Because under martial law, the Constitution is suspended. Everything in the Constitution is suspended. First Amendment, there's no more freedom of speech. There's no freedom of speech, no freedom of the press under martial law. There's no owning guns under martial law. There's no, protection of unlawful search and seizure or breaking into your house under martial law. They just sweep it all under the rug. And I think that is what the agenda is. I think they want us to go out and buy a bunch of guns, freaking out about these shootings, freaking out that Obama's going to sign this legislature this secret order to take away our gun rights. Because it's going to be too much more of a mess to take away the gun rights than it'd be easier to just declare martial law. Because I'm telling you, in states like Texas and Nevada and Idaho, you ain't going to be taking those people's guns away. As Deacon John was saying earlier today, he says if they try to take all our guns away, there's going to be a civil war, and they'll lose. And also that military personnel have been saying, well, no, we're not going to go take people's guns away. Of course, they'll just bring in UN troops, or troops from another country, maybe the Chinese troops down on the borders of Mexico and Canada. Who knows? That is the theory that I am going on, is that their agenda is the opposite of what they want us to think their agenda is. And that's how they operate. Okay? So, all the talk about mind control and hypnosis, not super soldiers, but what are they called? Manchurian Candidates, and all that good stuff. So when we take a look at the history of mind control, I got here before me a lecture by Dr. Alan Shefflin that was given at a conference in 1995 in Dallas, Texas. It was the Mind Control series. They were doing a conference on mind control. And let's see what he talks about the history of what mind control is. Now, we can say that, mind control has been used since the beginning, through various religious factions and through religious ceremony and cult and government and tribalism. Anytime you get one person or a group of people who engage in controlling the rest of the tribe or the rest of the village, the rest of the state, the rest of the nation, then the rest of the world, through ideology, fear, and pleasure, to control them to do what a small group of people want. So we could say mind control has been around since we crawled up from the primordial soup. So let's see. I'll read bits and parts from Dr. Alan Shefflin's lecture. So he starts off with possession, exorcism, and mind control. The earliest historical evidence of mind control techniques can be traced to a practice known as triphoning. This practice involves cutting a hole in the skull of a person who is suspected of being possessed by evil spirits. The hole in the skull was believed to release the evil spirits. In some forms of triphoning, an instrument was inserted into the skull to scare out the spirit. The procedure was literally an early form of lobotomy. Trifling may be the first psychosurgery procedures designed to change socially unacceptable behaviors. Many trifling skulls have been recovered from civilizations throughout the world, giving evidence that trifling was a widely practiced by many ancient civilizations. Trifling is important because it was a medical procedure based upon the belief in possession. It seems to me, or this doctor speaking, that in many ways these notions have come back again in the 20th century. Now there was like some weird sort of cultish practice in the late 80s and early 90s about trifling, and it was a practice in the sort of fetishistic, sadistic S&M subculture of self-mutilization, where you have these people who mutilate themselves or mutilate others for sexual gratification and for fetish reasons. But I don't think they're doing it anymore. But I know in the 80s and 90s there was for a brief time, an obsession among some of these people for trifling, to actually make a hole in one's skull and getting off on it. That was really bizarre, but I remember it going around. Anyway, back to this. They called it mood madness. That was in the Middle Ages, when crazy people would, jump around, sing to the moon, howl at the moon, whatever it was called. Moon madness. The treatment of choice was exorcism, and they show an illustration of it here. This doctor says that this, of course, was an early equivalent of multiple personality disorder and the notion of possession theory. The body being inhabited by other beings is an important aspect of dissociation. The theory may have changed somewhat, but there is certainly a direct history from the possession ideas to the dissociation ideas that we experience today. The first real treatise in mind control, which was brought together the possession ideas and textbooks, was the Malleus Maleficarum, which was written in 1484, and it's called The Witch's Hammer, too. And I don't know if this was a medical text or, it was a medical text, the Malleus Maleficarum. The Malleus was used as a Bible for witch hunting, and it tells you how to identify witches and how to especially to interrogate them and how to cure them. Of course, the cure usually being killing them. Of course, remember, one of the techniques of determining if someone was a witch was to throw them out into the water, throw them into the ocean with their hands tied. If they floated, well, then they were a witch, and then they would get burned at the stake. But if they didn't float and sank, that means they weren't a witch, but they floated and died anyway, being drowned. So either way, you kill the victim. Because the doctor says the value of the Malleus is twofold. It is probably the second known textbook in history on cross-examination techniques, and the first one being the Platonic Dialogues. I don't know what that is. And so we get the Malleus, a systemization of knowledge of how to do interrogations to lead people to give confessions that you want them to give. And in the history of mind control, it plays a very important role. Of course, we saw this in the Spanish Inquisitions, in the Salem witch trials, that you would get these people to confess to crimes that they didn't do to stop the torture, to stop their imprisonment, or they would be promised certain things and not get it if they would confess to being an agent of the devil or confess, So that was mind control. You get someone to do something, and there's usually a political agenda behind it. Of course, the church had its agenda for witch hunts. The Malleus itself was then read by police departments a century later and used as the beginning of the Department of Police Manual. Let me jump ahead a couple centuries until last century in the 1800s with the birth of psychiatry, and it's perhaps to no surprise that there is a common link to possession theories and the birth of psychiatry. In the most of psychiatric treatments had the same elements of violence that we see in the Malleus. Blah, 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 blah. Okay. So we had psychiatric treatments based on possession paradigms. Of course, as we said, in the 1800s, we started seeing the whole notions of psychiatries, insane asylums, experiments on like lobotomies and stuff like that. And of course, the beginnings of straitjackets, rubber rooms, shock treatment, which was started in the 1900s. Fry someone's brain. That's what they called electrical shock treatment, which was used up until I think the 1960s, and they stopped doing that. That just frying someone's brain doesn't make them become sane. They used seclusion and wooden crib methods, is where they, seclude you into a room, or they restrained you in this sort of coffin bed-like thing, or in chairs, and these doctors back then really believed, it's like with the leeches, you put a leech on someone and it'll suck out the venom or something, or cure someone. They believed this was actual science. Perhaps, and here's one refinement that he thought was notoriously wrong, was the leading psychological theory of the 1800s, and that was phrenology, that you can measure the exterior of the brain, or rather of the skull, in order to understand the interior of the mind. And this is an illustration of, so the whole phrenology thing, which of course the Europeans and later the Nazis used to determine how pureblood someone was. If someone had enough Aryan in them, or was of a superior race based on the shape and size of their skull. And if you didn't meet those criteria, well, then you were obviously inferior or stupid. So that leads to hypnosis. The idea of mind control turned more serious, however, in our concerns, more contemporary when we come to hypnosis. This is Hypnos, the Greek god of sleep. Of course, hypnosis is not sleep, and so the name itself is deceptive as to the mechanism of hypnosis. Hypnosis began the modern era of Mesmer, whose theories were also wrong. Of course, mesmerize. They were not only wrong, but they were also plagiarized on interplanetary or planetary magnetism affecting mental states. I don't know what that means. Anyway, what Mesmer really happened upon, without realizing it, was the beginning of the idea of the laws of suggestion. And what he did is to set up what is called a bakwe. And you could see it here in an oak tub. Well, I can't show you the illustrations. The French nobility would come and touch the iron bars which were in a tub. The tub was filled with water with iron fillings, and people could then have convulsive states which were pleasant enough for them to repeat quite frequently. This was high society, not only treatment but also for entertainment. His work was studied by a presidential commission, or rather a Kingsman commission. King Louis XVI appointed a special commission to study mesmerism. At the time, it was receiving rave notices from the public and condemnation from medical societies. Of course, they did this report. The report that was issued on the work of Mesmer's student, Delhomme, was highly critical. The commission found that there was nothing to the interplanetary theories and the magnetic theories, and that they were then forced to explain why Mesmer got so many cures. And they attributed the cures to the power of the imagination, or rather than the study of the power of imagination as a way it can cure individuals. The commission left the issue alone. Basically what they're saying is Mesmer made people believe so much that there was a cure into this thing he was doing that it was a mind over matter thing, that the power of suggestion worked. These people believed that this hobbledegook would cure them. It would cure them, sort of like the placebo effect. The commission also issued a secondary report that was stamped eyes only for the king's eyes only, and in that report the commissioner said that there was an aspect of magnetism that was so dangerous that the practice would be stopped at once. It was a menace to morals, they said, that the attraction that developed between the magnetizer and the subject being magnetized was so great that seductions were inevitable, and therefore we have the first inkling of the relationship between hypnosis and hypnotic seduction in this secret report that was for the king's eyes only. Now remember, this is the King of France, Louis XVI, part of the Rothschilds, part of the bloodline of this royal order of reptilians. or whatever, the Blue Bloods. Mesmer died in disgrace and in exile after the report appeared, and hypnosis, which was still called animal magnetism at the time, fell into disgrace but not into complete abandonment. It wasn't until about 50 or 60 years later that James Baird, a Scottish physician, coined the term hypnosis and hypnotism, and it wasn't until about 50 years after that that hypnosis begins to be studied in a serious way, and the problems of mind control using hypnosis as a vehicle resurfaces. The Victorians were interested in hypnosis because it was fun to be hypnotized. They lacked the joys that we have, such as Geraldo, and so they had to entertain themselves by using hypnosis for their parlor games. And we got some illustrations that I can't show you, obviously. Walter Bodie, an English hypnotist, was perhaps one of the most famous of the stage performers. Of course, now here we're getting into hypnotic shows and magician shows, going to the Christopher Nolan movie, The Prestige, that I was talking about last half hour. He had a hypnosis and electrical show. Okay, wait. So, in the Victorian era, they loved all these shows. During the Victorian era, people's exposure to hypnosis was not only as a form of entertainment, but it seemed like a form of mind control. You could get people to do anything that you asked of them. You could have them be suspended between two chairs. You could even stand on them when they were suspended between the chairs, or you could do a lot of worse as well. If you were sensitive, perhaps don't watch the remember, I'm reading from a lecture, and he has slides that he was using, and I can't show you the slides. But the slide he was showing was of an iron bar held by the eyelets, put into the eyelids of the subject by a stage hypnotist in Georgia. Now, I've seen hypnotic shows, like when I was in college, and there weren't staged people. I saw people I knew get instantly hypnotized and doing weird stuff, like dancing to music that wasn't there, stripping or acting weird. And afterwards, when I asked them, I said, what happened? They're like, I don't know. I was just doing it. Now, one of these people using that was Barry Konikoff, who traffics under the name of Potentials Unlimited. Let me see. Self-hypnosis tapes. Oh, this is the guy who started the self-hypnosis tapes. Okay, let's get back to the central theme of mind control, which starts with Jean-Martin Charcot, who was the foremost neurologist of the time. It's in the Victorian area. While the stage hypnotists were persuading people that the mind could be controlled by hypnosis, the professionals were learning hypnosis as well, and they were learning it largely from a small group of people, the most influential of whom was Charcot. Jean-Martin Charcot, the greatest neurologist in Europe at the time, was frequently visited by kings and princes and certainly all of the most elite of the medical profession from around the world. And in his clinic at Le Soleil de Pétré in Paris, he would demonstrate hypnotic phenomena. He would, in his demonstrations, induce neurotic symptoms in people. People who came in with an ability to move one limb in hypnosis will be able to move that limb. Or with an inability to move a limb, could move it under hypnosis. But he would later transfer the neurotic system to the other limb, and so he can create and destroy and eliminate and transpose neurotic conditions. And this was a remarkable demonstration which impressed a number of people. But his theories were at odds with his major contemporaries, Libor, who is on the left, and we're back with The Art of Dreaming, with your host, who is still Michael Hemmingson, a.k.a. Worf Poe, Dr. Hemmingson, Papa Hem, and all those stuff. All those names, all those good things. Just want to make note here that Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com is 100% listener supported. That means we rely on you, our listeners, to keep on keeping on. We don't take ads. We don't run pesky ads every 10 to 12 minutes to interrupt the flow of the go. And we don't adhere to any corporate or uncorporate or whatever nudgings of who to have on and not have on and what kind of subjects to present. No mind control here, right? No MKUltra. So if you go to our landing page at freedomslips.com or revolution-radio.com, you will see a site support button. Click it. Takes you to PayPal. If you don't like PayPal, you got a snail mail address there. You can send checks or money order. Please don't send money. So help us keep on keeping on here. And with a couple more days, it's going to be the end of the world, end of the Mayan calendar. End of the world stuff I will deal with on News of the Weird in a couple hours. After the Bo and Rocco show, News of the Weird will deal with UFOs and the end of the world. Mayan calendar. So I've been talking about the history of mind control. Now, as I was talking about, mesmerism and hypnosis was a big fad in the Victorian era there in England. In fact, maybe even before that, in 1776, a Bavarian Jesuit by the name of Adam Weishaupt was commissioned by the House of Rothschild. Now, get that, it's the House of Rothschild, the big bankers, the ones who were floating Napoleon, and most of the wars of the 17th, 18th, and 19th and 20th century, whole Rothschild's banking system. They wanted this Jesuit to create a sort of centralized power base of all the mystery religions, the occults from the Egyptians and the Greeks and the Indians and the Babylonians, all the mystery school, mystery religions and the occultism, and to form it into one power base and create the creation of the Illuminati, basically. So this Jesuit, Adam Weishaupt, was the creator, the designer of the Illuminati and the New World Order. And from the Egyptian Book of the Dead, they found a lot of rituals about methods of torture and intimidation and drug use and the castings of spells and stuff that figure into occults, cults, mind control, and eventually the CIA and MKUltra, which I'm hopefully we'll get to and figure all this out in the next hour here. So now, of course, Sigmund Freud was very interested in hypnotism. And Freud, being one of the leading voice in psychology, hypnotherapy, and stuff like that. He was really influenced by hypnotic theories, and he worked with hypnosis for a year, but then abandoned it. And it's not quite clear why he abandoned it. Some have argued that he wasn't good at it, and some argued that he just he was afraid of it, of what he could do to people. He was scared of the seductive power of hypnosis, and the ability to move people into altered states of consciousness gave a feeling to the hypnotist of some such omnipotence that in itself was seductive, meaning that that the doctor, the person, the hypnotist putting person on hypnosis could start having godlike feelings and feelings of omnipotent grandeur, and start making people do things they normally wouldn't, like have women have sex with them, or men have sex with them. Anyway, making people doing sexual things that they normally wouldn't, which is the beta programming in MKUltra. He also thought it might have been some other force at work, like the devil, and that frightened him. So Einstein, Bernheim, this Dr. Bernheim, and Albert Muehl, a German hypnotist in the 1880s and 90s, had come up with the term false memory syndrome. It's also called retroactive hallucinations, and they wrote quite openly in their works that they were concerned that through the power of suggestion you could create an impenetrable witness for a court of law, that by hypnotizing somebody you could induce them to tell a false story. That story would be impervious to cross-examination because the individual would sincerely believe in the truth of what he or she was saying, and therefore you would never be able to effectively cross-examine that person because they would continually insist on the truth of what they were reporting. Now, we find that a lot of the super soldiers and other people who claim to be in mind control, they come up with these crazy stories about being on other planets, clones, and just other wild stuff that I believe may not necessarily be true, but these people have had these memories implanted in them. So if they start talking about any involvement they had with MKUltra or whatever, and then they start telling these crazy stories, well, people are going to say they're crazy. Okay, early efforts at mind control. The next step beyond false memory was the beginning to use these techniques deliberately for the purpose of mind control. Sorry, I'm not taking any calls right now. Luria, the first steps taken are by A.R. Luria in his institute at Moscow, Luria reasoned that if you can get people to have false confessions with hypnosis, you probably could build effective complexes on those false confessions. In other words, you can not only get people to report things that never happened, you could get them to experience the entire range of emotions affiliated with those events. And so Luria and his colleagues in Moscow in the 1920s began doing research on developing neuroses built upon the implantation of false memories. That work was replicated in the 1930s by Milton Erickson, Lawrence Kuby, and others who verified the truth of what Luria was reporting. Okay, so they started doing this stuff in Moscow. The Russians started doing a lot of this experimentation on false memories, mind control, et cetera, hypnosis in the 20s and 30s. And then, the Tavistock Institute was created out of that. A lot of us have heard about the Tavistock Institute as early form of, and that was out of London in 1921 to study and it was the study of the breaking points of humans. Kurt Lewin, a German psychologist, became the director of the Tavistock Institute in 1932, about the same time Nazi Germany was increasing its research into neuropsychology, parapsychology, and multi-generational occultism. Interestingly, a progressive exchange of scientific ideas was taking place between England and Germany, most notably in the fields of eugenics, the movement devoted to improving the human species through the control of hereditary factors and mating. The nefariously enigmatic union between the two countries was bonded partly through the Order of the Golden Dawn, a secret society which consisted of many high-ranking officials in the Nazi Party and British aristocracy. I remember Aleister Crowley was associated with the Order of the Golden Dawn, as were a lot of politicians, writers, and radical thinkers, as was the SS Nazi officer Heinrich Himmler. So we see that the Nazis then started researching into a lot of this mind control and hypnosis and all this do good, bad stuff, all kinds of various ways. We don't need to get into all of them. However, come the end of the war, well, let me see. Says brainwashing was carried out on the inmates of Dachau, who were placed under hypnosis and given hallucinogenic drugs like mescaline. During the war, parallel behavior research was led by Dr. Easterbrooks at Colgate University. His involvement with the Army, CID, FBI, and other agencies remains shrouded in secrecy. However, Easterbrooks would occasionally slip and discuss his work involving the creation of hypnoprogram couriers and hypnotically induced split personalities, or otherwise known as alters. We'll get into what alters are soon. After World War II, the U.S. Department of Defense secretly imported many of the top German Nazi and Italian fascist scientists and spies into the U.S. via South America and the Vatican. Of course, this was Project Paperclip. We brought a bunch of it's like we got half of them and Russia got the other half. Scientists involved in every kind of field, from rocket science to anti-gravitation to mind control. One of the more prominent ones was German General Reinhard Gehlen, Hitler's chief of intelligence against Russia. Upon arriving in Washington, D.C. in 1945, Gehlen met extensively with President Truman, General William Wilbur Donovan, who was director of the OSS at the time, which later became the CIA. The objective of their brainstorming sessions was to reorganize the nominal American intelligence operation, transforming it into a highly efficient covert organization. The culmination of their efforts produced the CIA in 1946. Reinhard Gehlen also had profound influence on helping to create the National Security Council, from which the National Security Act of 1947 was derived. This particular piece of legislation was implemented to protect an unconscionable number of illegal government activities, including clandestine mind control programs. So now we come to the evolution of MKUltra, or Mark Ultra, or whatever you want to call it. With the CIA and national security firmly established, the first in a series of covert brainwashing programs was initiated by the Navy in the fall of 1947. Project Chatter was developed in response to the Soviets' successes through the use of truth drugs. This rationale, however, was simply a cover story if the program were to be exposed. The research really focus on the identification and testing of drugs for use in interrogations and the recruitment of agents. The project was officially terminated in 1953. The CIA decided to expand their efforts in the area of behavior modification with the advent of Project Bluebird, approved by Director Allen Dulles in 1950. Its objectives were to 1. Discover a means of conditioning personnel to prevent unauthorized extraction of information from them by known means, 2. Investigate the possibility of control of an individual by application of special interrogation techniques, 3. Investigate memory enhancement, and 4. Establish defensive means for preventing hostile control of agency personnel. In August of 1951, Project Bluebeard was renamed Project Artichoke, which evaluated offensive uses of interrogation techniques, including hypnosis and drugs. 3 years prior to the halt of Project Artichoke, which was in 1956, Project MKUltra came into existence on April 13, 1953, along the lines proposed by Richard Helms, Deputy Director of the DDCI, with a rationale for establishing a special funding mechanism of extreme sensitivity. The hypothetical etymology of MK may possibly stand for mind control, sort of like the into English. Oh, it's not Russian, sorry, it's German. Achtung! It's Diamond! A host of German doctors, procured from the post-war Nazi talent pool, were an invaluable asset toward the development of MKUltra. The correlation between the concentration camp experiments and the numerous sub-projects of MKUltra are clearly evident. The various avenues used to control human behavior under MKUltra included radiation, electroshock, psychology, psychiatry, sociology, anthropology, graphology, harassment substances, and paramilitary devices and materials like LSD being the most widely dispensed material. A special procedure designated MK Delta, Mark Delta, was established to govern the use of MKUltra abroad. MKUltra Delta materials were used for harassment, discrediting or disabling purposes. Of the 149 sub-projects under the umbrella of Mark Ultra having been identified, Project Monarch, officially begun by the U.S. Army in the early 1960s, appears to be the most prominent and is still classified as top secret for national security reasons. If you listen to a lot of these super soldier and targeted individual types, they'll tell you that Project Monarch is still underway, still being used today. Monarch may have been culminated from MK search subprojects such as Operation Spellbinder, which was said to create sleeper assassins or Manchurian candidates who could be activated upon receiving a keyword or phrase, like Oreo cookie, Cookie Monster, or Wharfpo. Get a call and you hear Wharfpo, and all of a sudden you're an assassin while in a post-hypnotic trance. Operation Offham, a study which attempted to harness the power of occultic forces, was possibly one of several cover programs to hide the insidious reality of Project Monarch. Okay, so what they're saying is these projects are a combination of occultic forces, sleeper assassins, and hypnotic suggestion. Definition and description: the name monarch is not necessarily defined within the context of royal nobility, but rather refers to the monarch butterfly. When a person is undergoing trauma-induced electroshock, a feeling of lightheadedness is evidenced, as if one is floating or fluttering like a butterfly. There is also a symbolic representation pertaining to the transformation or metamorphosis of this beautiful insect from a caterpillar to a cocoon to a butterfly, which will return to its point of origin. Such is migratory pattern that makes this species unique. Occultic symbolism may give additional insight into the true meaning. Psyche is the word for both soul and butterfly, coming from the belief that human souls become butterflies while searching for a new reincarnation. Some ancient mystical groups, such as the Gnostics, saw the butterfly as a symbol of corrupt flesh. The angel of death is Gnostic art. And of course, remember, Joseph Mengele was called the angel of death. In Gnostic art, works as portrayed crushing the butterfly. A marionette is a puppet that is attached to a string and is controlled by the puppet master. Hence, Monarch programming is also referred to as marionette syndrome. We also have some of the super soldiers talk about Project Mannequin. They basically become these mannequins that are under the control of their handlers. Project Monarch could be best described as a form of structured dissociation and occultic integration in order to compartmentalize the mind into multiple personalities within a systematic framework. During this process, a satanic ritual, usually including Kabbalistic mysticism, is performed with the purpose of attaching a particular demon or group of demons to a corresponding altar. Of course, most skeptics would view this as simply as a means to enhance trauma within the victim, negating any irrational belief that demonic possession actually occurs. Now, when we hear testimonies and stories from these super soldiers, MKUltra, mind control victim people who talk about satanic rituals being performed on them as children and after childhood. Hang on, my throat is sore. I need to drink some beer. They often allude to the fact that satanic alignments and occult groups are working within the CIA and the government. But what this writer here is suggesting too is that the whole occult thing and satanic rituals is just a game to mess with the person's mind and to cause further damage, traumatic damage. And when people start remembering this stuff, they're going to just remember all this occult ritual stuff, and then it'll be blamed on Satanists, Luciferians, instead of these psychologists and scientists in the CIA. But through all this trauma, they then start creating alters, other personalities, alpha, beta, theta personalities inside of a person. Another way of examining this convoluted victimization of body and soul is by looking at it as a complex computer program. You have a file, the alter. It's created through trauma, repetition, and reinforcement. In order to activate or trigger the file, a specific access code or password is required. The victim survivor is called a slave by the programmer handler, who in turn is perceived as master or god. About 75% are female, since they possess a higher tolerance for pain and tend to disassociate easier than males. Subjects are used mainly for cover operations, prostitution, and pornography. Involvement in the entertainment industry is notable. A former military officer connected to the DIA told this writer, in the big picture, these people, the Monarch victims, are in all walks of life, from the bum on the street to the white-collar guy. In corroboration, a retired CIA agent vaguely discussed the use of such personnel to be used as plants or chameleons for the purpose of infiltrating a designated group, gathering information, and or injecting an ulterior agenda. There are inordinate amounts of alters in the victim survivor, with numerous backup programs, mirrors, and shadows. A division of light side good and dark side bad alters are interwoven in the mind and rotate on an axis. So the multiple personality syndrome, there you have, the good personality, the bad personality, the in between, the whatever. One might be homosexual, one might be a pedophile, one might be violent, etc., etc. One of the main internal structures within the system is shaped like a double helix, consisting of 7 levels. Each system has an internal programmer which oversees the gatekeeper, who grant or deny entry into the different rooms. A few of the internal images predominantly seen by victim survivors are trees, like the Kabbalistic tree of life, with adjoining root systems, infinity loops, ancient symbols and letters, spider webs, mirrors or glass shattering, mass castles, mazes, demons, monsters, aliens, seashells, butterflies, snakes, ribbons, bows, flowers, hourglasses, clocks, robots, chain of command diagrams, and or schematics of computer circuitry boards. Now look at what they said: demons, monsters, and aliens, mirrors, and shattering glass. Now could it be, some are suggesting it, that the entire alien abduction thing doesn't exist, and all these people are, these abductees, contactees, are actually victims of MKUltra, who are programmed to believe this stuff has been happening to them. They believe it so much, and they have corroborating stories. But why? A majority of the victim survivors come from multi-generational satanic families or bloodlines and are ostensibly programmed to fill their destiny as the chosen ones or chosen generations, a term coined by Joseph Mengele at Auschwitz. Now, this could go along the lines of multi-generational alien abductees of a certain DNA, that maybe it's not the aliens taking them, but our own government. Some are adopted out to families of similar origin. Others used in this neurological nightmare are deemed as the expendable ones, non-bloodliners, usually coming from orphanages, foster care homes, or incestuous families with a long history of pedophilia. There also appears to be a pattern of family members affiliated with government or military intelligence agencies. Many of the abused come from families who use Catholicism, Mormonism, or charismatic Christianity as a front for their abominable activities. Victim survivors generally respond more rapidly to rigid religions, dogmatic, legalistic, hierarchical structure because it parallels with their base programming. Authority usually goes unchallenged as their will has been usurped through subjective and command-oriented conditioning. Physical identification characteristics on victim survivors often include multiple electrical prod scars and or resultant moles on their skin. A few may have had various parts of their bodies mutilated by knives, branding irons, or needles. Butterfly or occult tattoos are also common. Generally, bloodlines are less likely to have subsequent markings, as their skin is to remain pure and unblemished. The ultimate purpose of the sophisticated manipulation of these individuals may sound unrealistic, depending upon our interpretive understanding of the physical and spiritual realms. The deepest and darkest altars within bloodlines are purported to be dormant until the Antichrist is revealed. These New World Order altars supposedly contain callback orders and instructions to train and or initiate a large influx of people, possibly clones or soulless ones, thereby stimulating social control programs into the New World. Non-biological twinning is yet another bizarre feature observed within Monarch programming. For instance, two young non-related children would be ceremoniously initiated in a magical soul bonding ritual so they might be inseparably paired for eternity. These essentially share two halves of the program information, making them interdependent upon one another. Paranormal phenomena such as astral projection, telepathy, ESP, etc. appear to be more pronounced between those two who have undergone the twinning process. Now, if you read the stories, the accounts of James Casbolt, who was twinned with Max Spear. Max Spear has been interviewed here on Revolution Radio by Eva Moore and, I believe, Lorraine Fenton. But Eva Moore for sure, I know that. He and Max Spear claim that they were in Project Monarch and they were twinned in this ceremony. Now there's the levels of the Monarch programming. There's the Alpha. Now, the alpha personality is regarded as the general or regular programming within the base control personality, characterized by extremely pronounced memory retention, along with substantially increased physical strength and visual acuity. Alpha programming is accomplished through deliberately subdividing the victim's personality, which, in essence, causes a left brain, right brain division, allowing for a programmed union of left and right through neuron pathway stimulation. Then there's the beta. It's referred to as sexual programming. This programming eliminates all learned moral convictions and stimulates the primitives devoid of inhibitions, often called the cat altars or sex kitten, are this level. These are the altars used for prostitution, pornography, and covert operations where sex is needed. Then you have the Delta Altar. This is known as the killer programming, originally developed for training special agents or elite soldiers, such as the Delta Force, the Mossad, etc., in covert operations. Optimal ordinal output and controlled aggression is evident. Subjects are devoid of fear, very systematic in carrying out their assignment. Self-destruct or suicide instructions are layered at this level. Now listen to this. Self-destruct or suicide instructions are layered at this level. They are devoid of fear and very systematic. Now, doesn't this sound a lot like some of these mass shooters? Say like Adam Lanza or the Columbine shooters. They just go in devoid of fear, and they start shooting, and they start killing. You know, a lot of people have been asking lately, how could that guy just shoot these 6-year-old children, all these kids? I mean, what kind of monster would do that? Well, let's say he was controlled, that his delta alter was activated, and then once the job is done, the delta self-destructs or suicides, kills itself at the end of the operation. And then we know nothing about it. And there's no trials. There's no evidence. Now there's another alter called the theta, considered to be the psychic programming. Bloodliners, those coming from multi-generational satanic families, were determined to exhibit a greater propensity for having telepathic abilities than did non-bloodliners. Due to its evident limitations, however, various forms of electronic mind control systems were developed and introduced, namely biomedical human telemetry devices or brain implants, direct energy lasers using microwaves, and or electromagnetics. It is reported that these are used in conjunction with highly advanced computers and sophisticated satellite tracking programs. So maybe all those people saying they're being controlled by the satellites and drones isn't too far off. And with all those people too, the super soldiers, the abductees, and everything who have the implants in their brains and their ears and their legs and their toes, makes you think. Now the Omega alter is the self-destruct form of programming, known as code green. The corresponding behaviors include suicidal tendencies and or self-mutilation. This program is generally activated when the victim survivor begins therapy or interrogation and too much memory is being recovered. Basically a fail-safe. So if the agent or operative gets caught, like James Holmes, we have heard that James Holmes did try to commit suicide in jail, or so they're saying. And if there's the possibility that too much information is going to get out, the Omega pikes in and self-destructs. Sort of like the Theta, I guess, or not the Theta, but the Delta. If the Delta's self-destruction programming fails. Okay, then we have the Gamma alter. It's another form of system protection through deception programming, which elicits misinformation and misdirection. This level is intertwined with demonology and tends to regenerate itself at a later time if inappropriately deactivated. Not exactly sure what that means, but it's some sort of deception programming. Okay, so what are the stages? How do you create an MKUltra Manchurian Candidate super soldier assassin killer? Let's go through the stages. Stage 1, induction and dissociative identity disorder. The initial process begins with creating dissociation within the subject, usually occurring from the time of birth to about 6 years. This is primarily achieved through the use of electroshock and is at times performed even when the child is in the mother's womb. Due to the severe trauma induced through electroshock, sexual abuse, and other methods, the mind splits off into alternate personalities from the core. Formerly referred to as multiple personality disorder, it is presently recognized as dissociative identity disorder and is the basis for Monarch programming. Further conditioning of the victim's mind is enhanced through hypnotism, double bind coercion, pleasure pain reversals, food, water, sleep, and sensory deprivation, along with various drugs which alter certain cerebral functions. Now, we hear constantly from these people who said they were in these programs that they were tortured as children, sexually abused, that they were forced to watch the abuse and murder of other children, at times maybe even forced to kill other children, and all this trauma and fear and abuse and reversal of pain and pleasure starts splitting off brain into different personalities, and for each split, they can then create a whole new person, which we get to stage 2, command programming. The next stage is to embed and compress detailed commands or messages within the specified alter. This is achieved through the use of high-tech headsets in conjunction with computer-driven generators which emit inaudible sound waves or harmonics that affect the RNA covering of neuron pathways to the subconscious and unconscious mind. Virtual reality optical devices are sometimes used simultaneously with the harmonic generators projecting pulsating colored lights, subliminals, and split-screen visuals. High-voltage electroshock is then used for memory dissolution. Programming is updated periodically and reinforced through visual, auditory, and written mediums. Some of the first programming themes include The Wizard of Oz and Alice in Wonderland, both heavily saturated with occult symbolism. Many of the recent Disney movies and cartoons are used in twofold manner, desensitizing the majority of the population, using subliminals and neuro-linguistic programming, and deliberately constructing specific triggers and keys for base programming of highly impressionable monarch children. Now, some of the conspiracy theorists out there say that all the children who were in the Mickey Mouse Club were all products of MKUltra and the Monarch Project, such as Britney Spears, who was a Disney kid, a Mickey Mouse kid, Mickey Mouse Club, as was her compatriot, the Hispanic girl singer. All of them basically. That they've all been conditioned since kids to later on become Illuminati emblems and rock stars, movie stars, idols, and so on and so forth. A prime example of how subliminal programming works is by looking at the recent Disney cinematic sensation Pocahontas, curiously billed as their 33rd, like the Freemasons, 33rd animated movie. In the movie, Grandmother Willow is a mystical 400-year-old tree who counsels the motherless Pocahontas to listen to her heart and help her realize all the answers lie within. Grandmother Willow is constantly talking in doublespeak and using reversals. That is, sometimes the right path is not the easiest one, the esoteric derivative being the left path, the path that leads to destruction, is the easiest one. In Illuminati-structured MPD systems, or multiple personality systems, the willow tree represents the occultic powers of Druidism. The intrinsic imagery of the tree's branches, leaves, and roots systems are very significant, as some of the dark spiritual proper ties associated with willow tree programming are: 1. The branches are used to whip victims in rituals and cleansing purposes. 2. A willow tree can endure severe weather disturbances and is known for its pliability or flexibility. Victim survivors of the program describe the willow's branches wrapping around them with no hope of escape. 3. The deep root system of the willow tree makes the victim survivor feel as if they are falling deeper and deeper into an abyss while in a hypnotic trance. Music plays an instrumental role in programming through combinations of variable tones, rhythms, and words. Frightmeister Stephen King's numerous novels and subsequent movies are purported by credible sources to be used for such villainous purposes. One of his latest books, Insomnia, features a picture of King with the trigger phrase, "We never sleep," below the all-seeing eye. A partial list of other mediums used to reinforce base programming are Pinocchio, Sleeping Beauty, Snow White, Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin, The Little Mermaid, The Lion King, E.T., Star Wars, Ghostbusters, Transformers 2, Batman, Bewitched, Fantasy Island, Reboot, Tiny Toons, DuckTales, The Dead Sea Scrolls, and The Tall Book of Make-Believe. A few movies which depict and or portray some aspect of Monarch programming are Hellraiser 3, Raising Cain, Labyrinth, Telephone, Johnny Mnemonic, Point of No Return, The Lawnmower Man, and Closet Land. It's difficult to figure out who the original programmer of this satanic project was, due to the substantial amount of disinformation and cross-contamination propagated by the powers that be. The two that went by the color-coded name of Dr. Green are a Jewish doctor named Dr. Greenbaum, who supposedly collaborated with the Nazis during World War II, and Dr. Joseph Mengele, whose trademark of cold-blooded and calculating brutality has not only scarred the skulls of survivors from Auschwitz, but also countless number of victims throughout the world. Mengele's direct involvement at the infamous Auschwitz concentration camp was suspiciously downplayed during the Nuremberg trials, and consequently no intensified effort by the U.S. and its allies was directed toward his capture. As a means to confuse serious investigators as to his whereabouts, U.S. officials would report Mengele being a non-threatening recluse in Paraguay or Brazil, or that he was simply dead. I don't know if any of you remember this book and movie called The Boys from Brazil. The movie stars Gregory Peck. He plays Dr. Mengele, and he's in a hideaway down in Brazil, Paraguay or wherever, down in Latin America, and he has cloned Adolf Hitler. Mengele has cloned Hitler and then given all these boys, these babies, up for adoption to families that closely resemble Hitler's family, Hitler's mother and father. He specifically found families within adoption agencies to give these Hitler clones to in an effort to reproduce the Hitler effect, that these boys would grow up to be great psychopathic leaders, basically. And so Mengele in the book, in the movie, is trying to induce into the world future Hitlers. A very strange book and movie, highly recommended. The Dr. Green thing, hang on a second. So his unprecedented research at the expense of thousands of lives, we're talking Dr. Mengele here, undoubtedly was a significant bonus to U.S. interests. Besides using the pseudonym Dr. Green, survivors knew him as Vaderchen, or Daddy, Schoner Joseph, beautiful Joseph, and David, and Fairchild. A gracefully handsome man of slight stature, Mengele would disarm people with his gentle demeanor, while at other times he would explode into violent rages. Other characteristics remembered by survivors were the cadence of his shiny black boots as he paced back and forth in his I love you not daisy game. If any of you have seen the X-Men Origins movie, we have a sort of Dr. Mengele Nazi guy who was doing experiments on Jewish children who seemed to have telepathic and paranormal abilities in the possible creation of super soldiers. Performed in Canada, of course, and we get Wolverine. The whole thing with the X-Men is these are all people whose paranormal abilities were enhanced and misused by the government, the CIA, and all that stuff, and et cetera, et cetera. So, and then came, I don't have time to read it, and I wanted to read this. Dr. D.C. Hammond gave a lecture called Hypnosis and Multiple Personality Disorder Ritual Abuse. He was from the University of Utah, and in 1975 at a hypnotherapist psychology conference, he gave what was called the Goldbaum speech. I'm not going to have time to read it, it's long, but I'll try to summarize it a bit. Basically, Dr. Hammond was working with multi-personality disorder patients, running first on the theory that that they were crazy, and he was out to cure them. But as through hypnotherapy, he discovered a lot of connecting dots between his patients, that they were programmed, that their other personalities were programmed, the alpha and the beta and the delta and the theta personalities, that there was ritual abuse and Satanistic rituals and stuff like that connected. But a lot of his patients had one connecting fact, and that was someone named Dr. Greenbaum, or Greentree, what he came up with called as the green programming. And all these very separated people were all connected somehow to this mysterious Dr. Greenbaum, this character who reprogram them and program their personalities. Even Sirhan Sirhan talked about Dr. Greenbaum. And so Dr. Hoyden comes up with a theory that if Dr. Greenbaum is in fact Dr. Mengele, that Dr. Mengele was behind the creation of a lot of these Manchurian candidates. Kind of makes you pause for thought. So our own government, the CIA, through Project Paperclip, takes the most notorious, most evil, most devious and nefarious, blah, 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 Nazi scientist, give him a new name, put him in the CIA to continue the work he was doing in Auschwitz and for Hitler and the SS, but to continue his research into mind control within the United States using soldiers and citizens. There's currently a lawsuit going on. Got the lawsuit right here. It's a lawsuit. It's a class action suit by 7,800 former military personnel who are suing the CIA, the Defense Department, and the U.S. government over the fact that when they were in the military at certain bases, that they were used for mind control experiments against their will. The case is in the U.S. District Court for the Northern District of California, Oakland Division. It was filed 2 years ago by the Vietnam Veterans of America, Swords to Plowshares, Veterans Rights Organization, Bruce Pierce, Franklin Rochelle, Larry Miro, Eric Muth, David Dufresne, Tim Michael Josephs, and William Blazinski against the CIA, Leon Panetta, the U.S. Defense, Dr. Robert Gates, Secretary of Defense, U.S. Department of Army, Pete Green, United States Secretary for the Army, and the United States of America itself, and Eric Holder. Class action suit. 7,800 soldiers claiming that they were subjected to a series of mind control experiments between 1950 and 1980, and they basically want they're not really seeking money. See, the suit is a complaint for declaratory and injunctive relief under the United States Constitution. Basically, declaratory relief means that they want the government to admit to what they were doing, and then injunctive relief, they want the court to order the estoppel of any more of these experiments done on soldiers or civilians. Do we really think that's going to happen? Do we really think that the U.S. government is going to? Because if they gave them the declaratory relief, saying, "Oh yeah, we did that, we stopped doing that, we're sorry," well then all these 7,800 soldiers, and their families, and other soldiers are all going to jump on the lawsuit bandwagon. So no, the Department of Defense isn't going to come out and give them the declaratory relief that they're seeking, nor are they going to adhere to any injunction by the federal court to stop it. But at least this is bringing further light to the situation. There was recently a presidential commission on such stuff. I know that a couple of people in the alt media circles testified to it. So leading back to Stony Hook and Aurora, these recently shootings, the anomalies, the misinformation, disinformation, the weird little clues. What is going on and why? Are they using these young guys? James Holmes was a young guy, 23, 24. Adam Lanza is 20. The guy in the Oak Creek was 40. They've all been classified as loners, weirdos, on medications, and this is how they find them. I can remember someone was asking, well, how did they get this Lanza guy? He was at home with his mom all the time, or wouldn't his mom have noticed? Well, the guy was being treated for mental problems, let's say, issues. So, he goes to the doctors, he goes to an institute, they keep him there for a weekend. Well, that's where they get him. That's where they find them. And these let's say this is the case with Holmes and Lanza and whoever else. They weren't just created overnight. To create such a soldier take months, a year or two maybe. They identify them. They get them ready. They have plans in place. So for the ones they've used so far, how many more of them are out there? How many more of these guys are going to get activated and start going on crazy shooting sprees? Especially in the next few days as everyone's freaking out about December 3rd, 21st. Deacon John was saying he had heard from his clandestine sources that there would be 3 major operations. Now that could be the 3 that happen, or there could be another one coming up. But at least three have happened. Now we're seeing some copycat stuff. The guy in Newport, California, who shot off 50 rounds in the shopping mall. The guy in the hospital the other day, but they caught him before he did anything. Now we got kids bringing guns to school, people freaking out. I think they're counting on a lot of copycat incidents. They're counting on a lot of people being triggered by these events, either just because they're just nuts, or maybe they have been programmed as well that when they see this happen on TV, their alters go into activate mode, and they go off and start shooting away. But in other cases, you're simply just going to see other people going out and start shooting. I think that's one of the things they want. So they have their main agenda shooters, and then they're going to have the backlash of copycatters, of paranoia, of kids bringing guns to school. We've seen incidents in the last few days of a lot of schools going on lockdown just because people are getting paranoid. There was the one case of the security guard saw an umbrella in a kid's backpack, and he thought it was a rifle. We had the incident recently. The kid says his parents gave him a .22 to protect himself, and he holds the gun up to the heads of these 2 girls. It's a domino effect that I think they've planned on. Create a lot of fear, get people to go out there and buy more guns and use them, all leading toward martial law. Not necessarily taking our guns away and eradicating the Second Amendment, but enacting martial law and eradicating the entire Bill of Rights, the entire Constitution. The president can suspend the Constitution for, I believe, a maximum of 180 days before it goes up to Congress to examine the situation and determine whether to grant the president power to keep the martial law or suspension of the Constitution going or not.